All right, good morning, Latin 4 students. As promised, I'm recording this extension of our uh, learning about compound verbs in Latin and how they can get paired with the dative. Yesterday, you guys contributed nicely to a review of the prefixes. Oops, I forgot to make curcum green. Forgive me for that mistake. But the prepositions which become prefixes, we covered those quickly yesterday, reviewing the meanings of these words as prepositions and as prefixes. Um, I've added a few in red to kind of amplify the options with some of them, to give some synonyms or some nuances that match our habits of speech in English. So we could say, for example, with ante, uh, I stood before the temple. Um, but if the action I'm doing is walking, I would likely say I walked ahead of the dog, something like that, rather than I walked before the dog. So these nuances are um, suitable for English. Some of them are suitable for Latin, like the additional meaning that I've put in parentheses for pry. And we'll see more about that in just a moment. So my job is to carry forward with a discussion of which verbs can receive the prepositional prefixes. The short answer is any simple, and by simple I mean uncompounded verb, is liable to receive a prefix. But which ones actually do in Latin is determined by the expressive needs of the speaker. Whatever the speaker wants to say is going to guide the choice of a simple verb and the choice of a prefix for that. The simple verbs will include linking verbs like som, intransitive verbs like cato, sto, and venio. I trust you remember what all of those mean. If not, you may want to be looking them up as we move forward. Remember, you can pause the video at any point to do so. And then some transitive verbs that get prefixes do, facio, ferro, yacio, pono, just to name a few. All right, I do want to backtrack though a little bit. Hey, backtrack seems like a compound verb in English. Imagine that. Um, anyway, as we're backtracking, remember that in elementary Latin, these verbs, simple verbs, uncompounded verbs, are commonly used with prepositional phrases. We've been doing that since dinosaurs roamed the earth in Latin 1. Prepositions take their required cases. You guys don't know pry as a preposition officially. I believe it takes the ablative case. So pry vobis sum would be a way of saying I am in front of you. In a physical classroom, I certainly would be physically in front of you. Um, Madison vitam ante libertatem posuit. Well, in the preamble to the Constitution, if we credit Madison with that document, Madison placed life before liberty, literally in his sequence life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And this, I hope, rings a bell, even though you did not see it in this particular format. Um, but in the work you did last week on the intersection of Greek culture and Roman culture, or I should maybe better say the influence of Greek culture upon Roman culture, um, there was a quotation from Horace, and I have put that forward here with a prepositional phrase, Graecia artes tulit in agrestem Latium. Tulit is from Pharaoh. I'm trusting you guys see that now if you didn't before. And it says, in essence, Greece brought or carried arts into rustic Latium, into Latium that was more suited to life in fields than life in cities. Okay, so that prepositional phrase in takes the accusative because there's motion involved. Cool. Inspecting. Oh my gosh, this is a compound verb. When we inspect the way that um, all of a sudden, when there's a compound verb, there we come to use the dative with that. We're going to see the following things when we look into this issue. The former preposition, which is now a prefix, adds an adverbial force to the augmented verb. And by adverbial force, I mean the prefix is no longer a standalone preposition. It's more or less serving together with a simple verb to modify the simple verb's meaning. It's augmented, it acquires a new one. When those are used in Latin, what were the objects of the preposition are converted to the dative case. And if you need to give a name to these datives, they really are datives of reference. They show the reference point of the adverbial component of the compound verb. That's wordy and complicated. You don't necessarily need to think of them as datives of reference, but if it's a helpful way of thinking about them, of classifying them, they are. And we'll see examples in just a moment. But just a quick caution. Just as in English, a compound verb in Latin is going to acquire often a nuance to its meaning, and a nuance to the meaning which you must think about. And I'd like you to consider the following sentence. The nuance to the simple verb plus preposition, run over. So if I say the car ran over the can, um, that's very different from saying overrun, or in the past tense, overran. We would not normally say the car overran the can, but we would say the attackers overran the defenders. I'm not sure we would be communicating the same thing if we said the attackers ran over the defenders. We get a different image in our mind. We almost never use the simple verb forms, state and under. Simple verb form and preposition. But we do use the compound understate to mean something very, very specific. You guys know what an understatement is. Okay. And then slide back versus backslide. We might say the car slid back down the snowy hill, or the car slid back towards the ground, or towards the valley. But backslide is something that we apply not to cars or to moving objects, but rather to people's behavior. So the the poor fellow backslid into alcoholism, something like that, where it's not physical motion; it's a different nuance. All right. So advancing to actual Latin examples. The former preposition, now a prefix, as I've said, adds an adverbial force to the newly augmented verb form. So praesum comes to mean to the Romans to be in charge of. And it comes from originally a physical sense of a general is in front of his legion when he's speaking to them and preparing them for battle. Um, that took on an augmented meaning as a compound to be in charge of. If I use the compound antepono, it means more or less in English what I mean with prioritize. Literally, it means to put before. But today I am putting teaching before motorcycling. Actually, most days I do that. So I'm prioritizing teaching. And if we have to bring in the idea of motorcycling in English, we would have to add in a word like over. I prioritize teaching over motorcycling. Infero, infere intuli illatus. I want to draw your attention to some of the funky spelling changes that can happen, not only with irregular verbs like fero, fere, tuli, latus, but when a prefix is added to them, in fero, in fere, in tuli, but in front of latus, in changes its spelling um, and becomes assimilated to the L sound of latus. Okay. Infero more or less means import. We could say bring into. Um, and you guys bring knowledge of Latin into understanding English. And I'm going to make a bad pun that has a good purpose. That means that you guys are able to infer the meaning of English words simply because you know their Latin components. Okay? So we have a lot of derivatives from these compound verbs. But the important thing is not the derivatives, it's the use of them with datives of compounds. So in these sentences, which mirror the ones a couple slides back, you can rewind if you want to see them again. We now have the more rich nuances to the compound verbs. Vobis praesum, I am in charge of you all, at least as far as your instruction in Latin. Yep. Okay. Madison vitam libertati anteposuit. Madison put life before liberty. Um, I don't know if we want to say Madison prioritized life over liberty, but we could uh, bring that into English thus. And then the rest of the quotation that Horace actually wrote, because he used the dative agresti latio in that quotation. Graecia Graecia capta ferum victorem capit et artes intulit agresti latio. Greece captured Greece, captured its uncivilized conqueror, and imported the arts into rustic Latium. When we translate these into English, sometimes we just have to rip the compound verb apart. Intulit, brought into. So we can say Greece brought the arts into rustic Latium. Even though we're seeing it as dative, we might need to translate it as a prepositional phrase. Okay, final slide. We're going to wrap this. I'm sorry, that's not English. We're going to wrap this up now with a picture that may be familiar to you. I think I've shown it to you in the past of Romulus shown in battle against the Sabines when the Sabines had come to recapture or take back their daughters and sisters. Well, Romulus, as you know, was the first king of Rome. So on a list of the kings of Rome, he's at the top. Who comes under Romulus? Based on the review that you did in the homework assignment, you'll know that it's Numa. Here he is shown consulting the nymph Egeria as he is working on the religious laws and the calendar that he created for Rome. And so I want you guys to think of this in terms of a compound verb that we're learning as part of lesson 27. Numa Romulo successit. In straightforward English, Numa succeeded Romulus, dative of reference. We can also, more visually go back to the metaphor as Numa moved under or went under or succeeded Romulus. All right, one more. This is a quotation from the translation or comprehension work that you did yesterday. Nullam partem Romae adiacit. I'd like you guys to not just look up ad icio, ad icere, adiaci, adiectus in the back of the textbook, but consider that it is odd, meaning to or toward or near, plus yakio yakere, meaning throw. Or if you don't want to give the violence of it, it can also mean to put um, over a substantial distance. So this phrase that you encountered, and it was explained in the textbook a little bit, you can use the meaning add um, for adyakit, and we get the phrase he, that is pneuma, added no part, no territory, really, no part, no territory, to Rome. Super literally, and it'll sound clunky to you, he threw no part to Rome. I don't know if you want to say that um, in a polished translation, because remember, we want to absorb the nuance of the Latin and bring it into English from time to time. So he added no part to Rome. Finally, and this is final, we're going to wrap up with one of those aha moments, at least I hope it is. Um, and I'm going to take us back to ad ikio, ad ikere, ad ieki, ad iectos. So here's a couple of trio of sentences. De Graecia Latioque Horatius scripsit. Horace wrote about Greece and Latium. We know that. Verbum agrestis agreste latio adjectum est. What's that mean? Well, it means the word agrestis agreste, the word rustic, was added to Latium. It was added as a descriptive word to add the nuance, to throw next to the word Latium, again, to throw next to the word Latium, the idea that Latium was rustic, uncultured, countrified as opposed to cityfied. Um, and I'd like to ask you, have you had the aha yet? What do we call those descriptive words which we throw next to or add next to nouns to describe them? Yeah, you're right. They are adjectives. Our word adjective comes from a compound verb. Now, let's not, in the aha moment, forget that agresti latio, as Horace wrote it, is a dative of reference, feeling the force of that adverbial prefix on the compound verb. Greece brought arts into rustic Latium. All right. I hope that I have brought some new knowledge into your minds. I'm going to stop recording now. I'm going to be posting the assignment to practice this. It's a couple of workbook activities. I will say the workbook activities, the first one has nothing to do with dative with compound verbs. Don't stress about it. It's straightforward stuff. The second one does have to do with datives and compound verbs. It is challenging. It's challenging in content as well as in the grammar. Um, but you guys are up to the challenge, definitely. Um, I'm going to say one last word about it. It is related to the how do I want to say this? The episode we haven't read about in the textbook where the third king of Rome, Tullus Hostilius, led a war against the Albans. I think we have talked about this whole episode in the past of the three Horatii triplets fighting the three Alban Curiatii triplets. Um, if it helps to have that context as you begin working on that sentence, uh, there it is. If you need to Google about the Horatii and the Curiatii, you can do that. But use that just for the background context and not for the translation. All right, this has gone long. Sorry it has done so, but I hope it has been helpful. Ciao.